Welcome to Marantz Rantz, no advice on finance. Spin the wheel and take a chance. Get an NFT and a little education. The system got undertold, that knowledge is flotation. You wanna learn? Well, you came to right place. You're pumping AMC, might get slapped in the face. Get your due diligence, know who the villain is. Don't be a sheep when the shepherd's carnivorous. So come learn, laugh, and maybe you win big. And listen up, y'all, the wheel is not rigged. Everybody get a chance in the live chat. Kyoto spin wheel, you win just like that. Retail fight back and this retail winning. Y'all just wait, man, this is just the beginning. All fellow simians, GME group singing the truth. We just chillin', infinity pool swimming. So welcome to Marantz Rantz. A lot of knowledge but no advice on finance. Don't even need pants, you can tune in naked like Kenny the Mayo Man. Internet's most hated. Don't wanna lose your money, then it's time for you to listen. If you're ignorant, invest in AMC, a superstition. The stream about ready, they told us to don't dance. I do what I want. Welcome to Marantz Rantz. 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 Welcome to Marantz Rantz.
That's right, y'all. Welcome back. Welcome back to Marantz Rantz. Plenty of good information, a little bit of motivation, a whole lot of truth, no financial advice. As the song says, I do what I want. You know what it is. Shout out to everybody out here on TikTok. I see you guys. TikTok 100%. I am not who you think I am, so I apologize for that. But shout out to my son. He just texted me. My son texts me and goes, Dad, are you Rico Knows? I might just slap him through the phone, bro. I think he's trying to troll me right here on this TikTok. But as far as the internet goes over here on YouTube, we're going to have fun today. Today is FOMC meeting, and as the Fed minutes come out, guys, and we do it, we will be listening to Jerome Powell. Yes, Jerome Powell, who's the head of the Fed. If you guys do not know, Jerome Powell, his past allegiance was to the Carlyle Group, where he was on the board of directors there and a managing director. So when I heard the Carlyle Group talk, David Rubenstein was actually talking about what the Fed might do moving forward. He was like, hey, guys, listen up. The bad times are behind us, and we're going to get ahead of it. And me personally, hey, let me tell you how great it is, how I think all things are tied to GameStop. Are you ready? You know how smart I think Ryan Cohen is when it comes to things about finance. GameStop's earnings report is on March 19th. Do you know when the Fed meeting is again? I know it's today, but do you know when the next one is? March 20th. So if they're going to come hawkish or dovish, I don't care how you want to come at us, okay? And what does that mean, guys? Hawkish means, guess what? They're going to come at it hard and they're going to increase rates. Or they're going to cut rates. And if they cut interest rates, the markets should go up. And in theory, bonds should be a better bet sometimes. But I'll tell you what, I'll leave it all alone. For the geopolitical footprint, the macroeconomic footprint, everyone that wants to play an angle here right now with this meeting, I'm just letting you know, I buy GameStop. That's it. I don't even care. I don't care what happens on this planet. I don't care if there's World War III in my backyard. I don't care if they come through Texas, through all the barbed wire in the world. It's not going to change my day. The only thing that matters to me is that GameStop gets evaluated correctly and people understand what it's worth. Because right now, the naysayers out there, they have no idea what the hell we're talking about. I'm going to give you a case in point. 2 nights ago, I was live on the stream. You guys were here. There was a jackass by the name of Curtis. Curtis, you're living in infamy right now, but I'm going to tell you, Curtis, I went ahead and sent the video to someone. Someone was watching it for the very first time. They were watching my live stream, and they go, yo, Marantz, is your show like this all the time? I said, yeah. If you were to watch it, then you would know. He's like, nah, man, that was crazy. This guy, he has a lot of good points, and you didn't answer them. And I'm just like, no, I'm not going to answer them. I'm not going to go swimming in the mud with the pigs and to tell you, hey, guess what? They're all wrong. Let them think they're right. Let them think they're right. Let them think the whole world's going digital. There's no physical. GameStop doesn't make money. They're a dying business model. Let everyone think that. Right about now, I'm about to be greedy. I'm about to put money in my own pocket because I'm telling you now, I can get these shares at $14. You're out of your mind, guys. GameStop has more cash on hand than Kohl's, than Target, than Best Buy. I think they're close. But I'm talking about combined. Combined. And you're going to tell me that they're not the company to be with? Hey, I see Walmart went ahead and got to the pinnacle of what they are right now. Pinnacle of what they are right now, and they do a 3-to-1 reverse stock split. Not reverse, I'm so sorry. A 3-to-1 stock split announced for next month. Then I see Tesla come out, and Tesla's battling in the world of Maryland courts, Delaware courts, where Elon Musk feels he's entitled to $55.8 billion worth of equity. From shareholder equity, guys, because he gets paid in shares. So he wants to hold the majority of his company. I get it. That company wouldn't be anything without him. But it wouldn't be anything without Delaware either, and or without shareholders. People have to know exactly what we're talking about here. What are the pros and cons versus being incorporated in Delaware versus not? Elon Musk puts out a tweet. I attack him on Twitter and I tell him what's up on TikTok. I say, hey, Elon, explain it to me. Why would you ever say that you wouldn't want to be incorporated in Delaware? 92% of all the companies in the S&P 500, 92%, guys, are incorporated in Delaware. No state income tax, no franchise tax, no property tax. There's so many other things that you don't have to pay when you're incorporated in Delaware. Now, we know what Maryland is. Guys, remember Connect the Dots? And we talked about Maryland. If you're incorporated in Maryland, it actually limits. There's a statute of limitations for like when your board of directors get sued and how they're protected. And that's why some companies incorporate in Maryland, i.e. Mullen Automotive trying to move to Maryland. You guys saw it, and their proxy got voted on down, and they didn't get to move. Well, they were just trying to defend and protect David Mitry, their CEO. I'm waiting for Adam Aaron to do the same thing, and or Adam Aaron better get the hell. He better lawyer up because AMC is a terrible investment right about now. But Tesla has a lot of rich people around it, and they understand the board of directors have personal relationships with Elon Musk, as they should. After 11 years of making money, as they should, you can't pay the man $55 billion a year. It's just not feasible. And for him to stand there and cry on Twitter is beyond me. It means he doesn't understand what the hell we're talking about. You feel you're entitled to something when your company's only made $15 billion last year, 2023, and $10 billion in 2022? No, you can't get paid double what the net profit was for the whole damn company. That CEO needs to check himself at the door. When Ryan Cohen says overpaid executives, well, this just might be one. And I don't know what his brand is worth. I don't know what he thinks he's worth influential, but I promise you, there's hardworking employees at Tesla that when they do get laid off or they do get severance of some kind, they deserve a pocket. That $55 billion better go to someone or something or some benefits. Somehow, some way, some infrastructure for the company, not necessarily to the pockets of Elon so that he can go buy another platform like Twitter just to play around. I'm not with it, guys. I'm just not. And I support whatever Elon wants to do as far as free public speech and, all that's nah. Miss me with the bullshit, man. $55 billion is ridiculous. It's an impossible number. And I'll never agree to it. I'm just letting you guys know that now. Now, GameStop. We're going to talk about it on the Fed because whatever the Fed chooses to do, apparently Ryan's setting himself up. He went ahead and put GameStop's earnings on the 19th. I can't remember the last time GameStop's earnings was on a Tuesday of the week, but I'm happy it is. I'm like, all right, I'll still be here with you, but I'm just letting you know I'm ready for the meeting. Is the meeting going yet? It is not going. It's supposed to go at 11:30 in 2 minutes. When it starts, I'll start and I'll put it on the show and I'll have it playing in the background and we'll talk about it. We'll comment over it. But I feel like between now and then, March 20th, and then there's an additional meeting in April and May, you're going to go about 2 months right now with whatever regulatory form he actually does, right? Like the interest implications. And then, of course, you might get a jobs report from now until then. So I anticipate jobs reports being down because I'm in the sector. I understand it. And I'm telling you, it doesn't look good out there. It does not look good there. I don't care how they paint the picture, but whether the far right wants to show you that, jobs are down and we're getting ready for an election, or we can go the opposite route. They're going to inflate the number and lie to you and say it's all great. And you can find out what it's all there. ChargePort is owned by is ChargePort owned by private equity? Asking for my dad. Didn't have to answer now. Just checking. Yeah, Josh Brown, you're on my list. I know you gave me that question last week, and I said, I'm going to get to it. I've been so busy. I got to coach basketball tonight. I don't even have my pen on me. ChargePort, I got it. It's in my head, but I will get to it tonight. I'll even do a video for you, a separate video. I'll put it up, and we'll figure it out from there. I'm going to read the chat. I'm going to get to you guys. The GME meme coin, you guys are asking questions about that. My opinion about that. I think that GameStop should go in and sue. I think they should sue whomever, and get all that money to themselves in the bottom line because they're using their NIL, their name, image, and likeness just to, profit off the people. And I know that cryptocurrency is supposed to be peer-to-peer system and, blockchain technology eliminates the fact that fraud should not be allowed, but there's just no way. There's no way you're going to be able to utilize my name and somebody's making money on Solana. Is it Solana? Is that what it is? I don't know exactly what's going down, but because I don't really look into fake shit. Like, guys, listen, when the distractions come, because they come all the time, I literally just avoid them. I just what's the guy doing me? I was looking at GameStop financials again, and I was looking at how much money they generated, like profit, based off of the smaller footprint now versus the bigger footprint they had then. So like 4 years ago, when GameStop actually was losing money, $700 million, in a year. I was like, man, what did they do? They did like $9 billion worth of sales and they still lost $700 million. It was like they were forcing themselves to lose money. And now when you see what Ryan Cohen's been doing, he's actually learned how to cut the footprint. But here we go with the meeting, guys. I got to unmute it. I got to get ready. And we're starting now. So appreciate you guys. This is Jerome Powell.
Good afternoon. My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. The economy has made good progress toward our dual mandate objectives. Inflation has eased from its highs without a significant increase in unemployment. That's very good news. But inflation is still too high, ongoing progress in bringing it down is not assured, and the path forward is uncertain. I want to assure the American people that we are fully committed to returning inflation to our 2% goal. Restoring price stability is essential to achieve a sustained period of strong labor market conditions that benefit all. Today, the FOMC decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged and to continue to reduce our securities holdings. Over the past 2 years, we have significantly tightened the stance of monetary policy. Our strong actions have moved our policy rate well into restrictive territory, and we've been seeing the effects on economic activity and inflation. As labor market tightness has eased and progress on inflation has continued, the risks to achieving our employment and inflation goals are moving into better balance. I will have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. Recent indicators suggest that economic activity has been expanding at a solid pace. GDP growth in the fourth quarter of last year came in at 3.3%. For 2023 as a whole, GDP expanded at 3.1%, bolstered by strong consumer demand as well as improving supply conditions. Activity in the housing sector was subdued over the past year, largely reflecting high mortgage rates. High interest rates also appear to have been weighing on business fixed investment. The labor market remains tight, but supply and demand conditions continue to come into better balance. Over the past 3 months, payroll job gains averaged 165,000 jobs per month, a pace that is well below that seen a year ago, but still strong. The unemployment rate remains low at 3.7%. Strong job creation has been accompanied by an increase in the supply of workers. The labor force participation rate has moved up on balance over the past year, particularly for individuals aged 25 to 54 years, and immigration has returned to pre-pandemic levels. Nominal wage growth has been easing and job vacancies have declined. Although the jobs to workers gap has narrowed, labor demand still exceeds the supply of available workers. Inflation has eased notably over the past year, but remains above our longer run goal of 2%. Total PCE prices rose 2.6% over the 12 months ending in December. Excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.9%. The lower inflation readings over the second half of last year are welcome, but we will need to see continuing evidence to build confidence that inflation is moving down sustainably toward our goal. Longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. The Fed's monetary policy actions are guided by our mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. My colleagues and I are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship as it erodes purchasing power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. We're highly attentive to the risks that high inflation poses to both sides of our mandate, and we're strongly committed to returning inflation to our 2% objective. Over the past 2 years, we have raised our policy rate by 5.25 percentage points, and we've decreased our securities holdings by more than $1.3 trillion. Our restrictive stance of monetary policy is putting downward pressure on economic activity and inflation. The committee decided at today's meeting to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 5.25% to 5.5%, and to continue the process of significantly reducing our securities holdings. We believe that our policy rate is likely at its peak for this tightening cycle, and that, if the economy evolves broadly as expected, it will likely be appropriate to begin dialing back policy restraint at some point this year. But the economy has surprised forecasters in many ways since the pandemic, and ongoing progress toward our 2% inflation objective is not assured. The economic outlook is uncertain, and we remain highly attentive to inflation risks. We are prepared to maintain the current target range for the federal funds rate for longer, if appropriate. As labor market tightness has eased and progress on inflation has continued, the risks to achieving our employment and inflation goals are moving into better balance. We know that reducing policy restraint too soon or too much could result in a reversal of the progress we've seen on inflation and ultimately require even tighter policy to get inflation back to 2%. At the same time, reducing policy restraint too late or too little could unduly weaken economic activity and employment. In considering any adjustments to the target range for the federal funds rate, the committee will carefully assess the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. The committee does not expect that it will be appropriate to reduce the target range until it has gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2%. We will continue to make our decisions meeting by meeting. We remain committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal and to keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Restoring price stability is essential to set the stage for achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the longer run. To conclude, we understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you. I look forward to our questions.
Yeah, I bet you do. This is ridiculous, guys. Do you guys even know what's happening? I'm going to explain it all at the end of this.
Gina Smiley from the New York Times. Thanks for taking our questions. Obviously, in the statement and just in your remarks there, you note that you don't want to cut interest rates without greater confidence that inflation is coming down fully. I wonder, what do you need to see at this point to gain that confidence? And as you make those decisions, how are you weighing recent strong growth in consumer spending data against the sort of solid inflation progress you've been seeing?
Sorry, say that last part again.
How are you weighing the growth data and consumption data, which have been surprisingly strong, against inflation data?
Okay, so what are we looking for to get greater confidence? Let me say that we have confidence. We're looking for greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably down to 2%. Implicitly, we do have confidence and has been increasing, but we want to get greater confidence. What do we want to see? We want to see more good data. It's not that we're looking for better data. We're looking at continuation of the good data that we've been seeing. And a good example is inflation. So we have 6 months of good inflation data. The question really is, that 6 months of good inflation data, is it sending us a true signal that we are in fact on a path, sustainable path down to 2% inflation? That's the question. And the answer will come from some more data that's also good data. It's not that the 6-month data isn't low enough. It is. It's just a question of, can we take that with confidence that we're moving sustainably down to 2%? That's really what we're thinking about. In terms of growth, we've had strong growth. I mean, if you take a step back, we've had strong growth, very strong growth last year, going right into the fourth quarter. And yet we've had a very strong labor market, and we've had inflation coming down. So I think, whereas a year ago we were thinking that we needed to see some softening in economic activity, that hasn't been the case. So I think we look at stronger growth. We don't look at it as a problem. I think at this point we want to see strong growth. We want to see a strong labor market. We're not looking for a weaker labor market. We're looking for inflation to continue to come down as it has been coming down for the last 6 months.
And I'm sorry, if I could just follow up very quickly. When you say that you want to make sure that it's a true signal, is there anything that you're seeing in the data that makes you doubt that it's a true signal at this stage?
No, I think I would say it seems to be the likely case that we will achieve that confidence, but we have to achieve it, and we haven't yet. And so I mean, it's a good story. We have 6 months of good inflation, but you can, and you know this, you can look behind those numbers and you can see that a lot of it's been coming from goods inflation, for example, and goods inflation running significantly negative. It's a reasonable assumption that over time, goods inflation will flatten out, probably approximate zero. That would mean the services sectors would have to contribute more. So, in other words, what we care about is the aggregate number, not so much the composition, but we just need to see more. That's where we are as a committee. We need to see more evidence that sort of confirms what we think we're seeing and that tells us that we are on, gives us confidence that we're on.
This is not true. I just want to put this out there. This is not true.
Path down to 2% inflation.
Nick.
You're going to love this, guys.
Nick Timmeros of the Wall Street Journal. Chair Powell, it seems to me you raised rates rapidly over the last 2 years for two reasons. One was the risk of a wage price spiral. Two, there were risks of inflation expectations becoming unanchored. This morning's ECI report for the fourth quarter shows private sector payroll growth running at a sub 4% pace. Inflation expectations are very close to where they were before the inflation emergency of the last 3 years. And given that you appear to have substantially cut off these two tail risks, and that you've judged here today current policy is well into restrictive territory, what good reason is there to keep policy rates above 5%? Are you really going to learn more waiting
everything
6
tells
weeks
you to
versus
drop
3 months
right
from
now,
now
and you say no?
that you
This
have
is bullshit.
avoided those two risks?
So,
I'll explain it right now, guys. This is going to be
as
amazing.
you know,
It's crazy.
almost every participant on the committee does believe that it will be appropriate to reduce rates. And for partly for the reasons that you say, you know, we feel like inflation is coming down. Growth has been strong. The labor market is strong. What we're trying to do is identify a place where we're really confident about inflation getting back down to 2% so that we can then begin the process of dialing back the restrictive level. So overall, I think people do believe, and as you know, the median participant wrote down 3 rate cuts this year. But I think to get to that place where we feel comfortable starting the process, we need some confirmation that inflation is in fact coming down sustainably to 2%.
If I could ask differently, if you hold rates high as inflation moderates, as it has been, target rates will exceed the prescriptions of the Taylor rule or experience. What would be the reasoning for holding rates higher than the levels recommended by those rules in the current instance?
Good question.
Look, I think, as you know, we consult a range of Taylor rules and non-Taylor kind of rules.
I heard Taylor.
We consult them regularly. They're in our Teal book, and they're in all the materials that we look at. But you know, I don't think we've ever been at a place where we were setting policy by them. And they're, depending on the rule, it will tell you different things. There are many different formulations. Another way to think about it is implicitly is so. In theory, of course, real rates go up if holding all else equal as inflation comes down. But that doesn't mean we can mechanically adjust policy as real rates, as inflation comes down. It doesn't mean that at all, because for one thing, we don't know. We look at more than just the Fed funds rate. We look at broadly financial conditions. But in addition, we don't know with great confidence where the neutral rate of interest is at any given time. But that also doesn't mean that we wait around to see the economy turn down, because that will be too late. So we're really in a risk management mode of managing the risk, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, managing the risk that we move too soon and move too late. And I think to move, which is where almost everyone on the committee is in favor of moving rates down this year. But the timing of that is going to be linked to our gaining confidence that inflation is on a sustainable path down to 2%.
Howard.
Hi, thanks, Chair Bell. I'd like you to key in on the use of the word in the statement that inflation still remains elevated. You've pledged to cut rates before inflation reached 2%. So that implies that there's some sort of intermediate step here on inflation, and that a cut would be consequent with a change in the statement language that inflation remains elevated. What's the step down from there?
Yeah, I don't know that we worked out the particular statement language and that kind of thing. I would just say, if you look at where 12-month inflation is, and it's still well above, core is 2.9%, for example, 12 months, which is way down from where it was. Very, very positive development, very fast decline. And the case is likely that it will continue to come down. So that's where it is. But we're wanting to see, more data.
So if I could follow up on that, the statement allows that you want greater confidence on inflation falling before you cut, but it doesn't mention the other side of the mandate, a slide in employment. Would a slide in employment also bring you to the point of cutting rates?
Yes. So let me say that we're not looking for that. That's not something we're looking for. But yes, if you think about, in the base case, the economy is performing well, the labor market remains strong. If we saw an unexpected weakening certainly in the labor market, that would certainly weigh on cutting sooner. Absolutely. And if we saw inflation being stickier or higher or those sorts of things, would argue for moving later. In the base case, though, where the economy is healthy and we have ongoing growth, solid growth, we have a strong labor market, we have inflation coming down, that's what people are writing their SEP around. And in that case, what we're saying is, based on that, we think we can and should take advantage of that and be careful as we approach that question of when to begin to dial back restriction.
Claire Jones, Financial Times. Just to circle back to the greater confidence aspect of the statement, there's been a lot of unanimity in recent meetings. I'm just wondering, going forward, when it comes to all needing greater confidence, is the unanimity, or at least consensus among FOMC members, about what the threshold for that greater confidence is? And if not, could you maybe tell us a little bit about the discussion today on, what the variations between FOMC members was on what constitutes enough confidence to cut rates, and also if there was any variation on how quickly that greater confidence threshold could be reached. Thank you.
We're not really at that stage. There was no proposal to cut rates. Some people did, talk about their view of the rate path. I would point you to the SEP as good evidence of where people are, although it is one cycle later. So, we're not at a place of really working out those kinds of details because we weren't actively considering, moving the federal funds rate down. I will say there is a wide disparity, a healthy disparity of views, and you see that in public statements, in the minutes and the transcripts when they're released every 5 years. So we do have a healthy set of differences, and I think that's actually essential for making good policy. We're also able to reach agreement generally because we listen to each other, we compromise, and even though not everybody loves what we do, they're able to, for the most part, able to join in. To me, that's a well-functioning public institution.
Rachel.
Hi, Chair Powell, Rachel Siegel from the Washington Post. Thanks for taking our questions. So over the past few years, there have been all these real-time indicators that helped us gain a sharper understanding of where the economy was, like open table data or office attendance. You've talked about vacancies in the past. And I'm wondering at the start of this year, what might be on that dashboard for you that's giving you the clearest picture of the economy, including on rents, if you could touch on that.
Including?
Rent costs.
Yeah. Well, so we're not, it's not the pandemic, so we can actually rely on more traditional forms. People are working, they're getting wages, and the economy is largely reopened and is broadly normalizing, as you see. So I wouldn't say we're looking at that sort of more innovative data as much. You point to rent, so of course we follow the components of inflation very carefully, which would be goods inflation. I talked about that a little bit. You mentioned housing inflation. So the question is, when will these lower market rents find their way into measured rents as measured in PCE inflation? And we think that's coming. And we know it's coming. It's just a question of when and how big it'll be. So, but that's in everyone's forecast, I would say. So that will help. But at the same time, we think goods inflation will probably it's been giving a lot of disinflation to the effort, and probably that declines over time, but it may well have some more time to run. The supply chains are not perfectly back to where they were. In addition, it takes time for the healing process to get into prices. So there may be still a tailwind. We'll find out with that. So we look at the things that relate to our mandate very carefully, and as you would imagine.
I guess just as a quick follow-up, do you feel comfortable at this point saying the economy has reached a soft landing, or is that part of looking for more confidence?
No, I wouldn't say we've achieved that, and I think we have a ways to go. Inflation is still, core inflation is still well above target on a 12-month basis. 12 months is our target. Certainly, I'm encouraged, and we're encouraged by the progress, but we're not declaring victory at all at this point. We think we have a ways to go.
Rick?
Steve.
Come on, Steve, give it to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've said that you would know the neutral rate by its works. So I'm wondering what you could tell me. How do you believe the neutral rate is working? We're telling you right now that growth is stronger. In other words, how much is the economy really being restrained right now by the current funds rate? And how much restraint does it really need additionally if inflation is still coming down?
So I think you do see in the interest-sensitive parts of the economy, you do see, for example, housing, you see the effects, you do. Your second question, though, really, I think is important, and that is a lot of this has come through, a lot of the disinflationary process has come through the healing of supply chains and also of the labor market. So you've seen that other set of factors is really different from other cycles and has brought that, working with tighter policy, which has enabled the supply side to recover, I think that mixture has been behind what has enabled this. So no, we really do think that we're having an effect broadly across the economy. I would point to the interest-sensitive parts of the economy as well as spending generally. But it's a joint story. It's a complicated story.
But how much restraint are you actually imparting to the economy, would you say, relative to the neutral rate?
So I think it's of course, that it's not something you can identify with any precision, but a standard approach would be to take the nominal rate, 5.3%, let's say, and subtract a sort of a forward measure of inflation. If you do that, and there are many, many ways to calculate that neutral rate, but that's one I like to do. And you're going to get to something that is materially above mainstream estimates of neutrality, of the neutral rate. You will. But at the same time, you look at the economy and you say, this is an economy that grew 3.1% last year. And you say, what does that tell you about the neutral rate? What's happening, though, is the supply side has been recovering in the middle of this. So that won't go on forever. So a lot of the growth we're seeing it isn't just a tug of war between interest rates and demand. You're getting, more activity because of labor market healing and supply chains healing. So I think the question is, when that peters out, I think the restriction will show up probably more sharply.
Rich.
Thank you. Sorry. Thanks for taking the question, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned earlier we're not seeking a weaker labor market. I think you said. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Do you think the labor market now is back to quote unquote normal, and that we can achieve the inflation target without wage gains coming back down to what they were pre-pandemic? Even with today's ECI levels, they were still above those pre-pandemic levels.
I think the labor market, by many measures, is at or nearing normal, but not totally back to normal. And you pointed to one or more of them. So I think job openings are not quite back to where they were. Wage increases rather are not quite back to where they would need to be in the longer run. I would look at it this way, though. The economy is broadly normalizing, and so is the labor market. And that process will probably take some time. So wage setting is something that happens. It's probably will take a couple of years to get all the way back, and that's okay. That's okay. But we do see. You saw today's ECI reading. The evidence is that that wage increases are still at a healthy level, very healthy level, but they're gradually moving back to levels that would be more associated, given assumptions about productivity, are more typically associated with 2% inflation. it's an ongoing process, a healthy one, and I think we're moving in the right direction.
So that process can continue without a weakening of the labor market, basically, you're saying?
Well, I think the labor market I don't know if it's rebalancing. Clearly, there was a fairly severe imbalance between demand for workers and supply at the beginning of the pandemic. So we lost several million workers at the beginning of the pandemic from people dropping out of the labor force. And then when the economy reopened, you remember 2021, you had a severe labor shortage, and it was everywhere. The panic on the part of businesses couldn't find people. So what's happened is we expected the labor market to come back quickly, and it didn't. And 2022 was a disappointing year. And, we were kind of thinking, well, maybe we won't get it back. And then 2023, we did, as you know. So labor force participation came back strongly in 23, and so did immigration. Immigration came to a halt during the pandemic. So those two forces have significantly lowered the temperature in the labor market to what is still a very strong labor market. It's still a good labor market for wages and for finding a job, but it's getting back into balance, and that's what we want to see. And one great way to look at that is what's happening with wage increases, and you see it now across the major things that we track. It isn't every quarter, but overall there's a clear trend, still at high levels, but back down to what would be consistent with where we were before the pandemic and with 2% inflation.
Chris.
Hi, Chris
so
Rugaber
wrong.
at
It's
Associated
like
Press. Thank you.
talking out of
I
both
wanted to
sides of your
follow up
mouth,
on
Brent.
Rich's question.
Just saying,
It sounded
double talk.
like you suggested that you're not worried about faster growth so much. So wanted to see if you're seeing anything that suggests that inflation could reaccelerate from here. And it sounds like you're saying you're not worried that solid growth from here on out poses any risk to inflation. Thank you.
No, I think that is a risk, the risk that inflation would reaccelerate. I think the greater risk is that it would stabilize at a level meaningfully above 2%. That's to me more likely. Of course, if inflation were to surprise by moving back up, we would have to respond to that, and that would be a surprise at this point. But I have to tell you, that's why we keep our options open here, and why we're not rushing. So I think both of those are risks, but I think the more likely risk is the one that I mentioned, which is you've had 6 good months, very good months, but what's really going to shake out here? When we look back, what will we see? Will inflation have dipped and then come back up? Are the last 6 months flattered by factors that are one-off factors that won't repeat themselves? We don't think so. That's not what we think, but that's the question we are asking. We have to ask, and we want to get comfort on that.
And just one quick follow-up. Governor Waller had mentioned the revisions that are coming on February 9th for the CPI data. Is that something you're watching as well? And if we see those revisions fairly minor, is that going to give you more confidence where things are going?
We'll just have to see. Yeah, we look at those. Last year was a surprise.
Michael McKee, Bloomberg Radio and Television. If you don't want to use the term soft landing, would you say at least that from your point of view now, the other scenario of a hard landing caused by the Fed is off the table, or the risks have diminished very much? And you mentioned below 2% inflation on a 3-month basis. Core PCE has been running at 1.5%. And there are those on Wall Street who think that if you maintain the level of restriction you have right now, you could end up with inflation running below your target. How do you see that?
So your first question, how to describe where we are. So I guess I would just say this. Executive summary would be that growth is solid to strong over the course of last year. The labor market, 3.7% unemployment, indicates that the labor market is strong. We've had just about 2 years now of unemployment under 4%. That hasn't happened in 50 years, so it's a good labor market. And we've seen inflation come down. We've talked about that. So We've got 6 months of good inflation data and an expectation that there's more to come. So this is a good situation. Let's be honest. This is a good economy. But what's the outlook? That's looking in the review. The outlook, we do expect growth to moderate. Of course, we have expected it for some time, and it hasn't happened. But we do expect that it will moderate as supply chain and labor market normalization runs its course. The labor market is rebalancing, as I mentioned. Job creation has slowed. The base of job growth has narrowed. And of course, 12-month inflation is above target and getting down closer to target. Is not guaranteed, but we do seem to be getting on track for that. So those are the risks and questions we have to answer. But overall, this is a pretty good picture. It is a good picture. Your second question was, sorry.
Could you get inflation that is below target, end up with inflation below target, and you have to do something about that?
So the thing is, we're not looking for inflation to tap the 2% base once. We're looking for it to settle out over time at 2%. And the same thing is true. If we have a month or two of lower, and we have that now, of inflation that's annualized at a lower level, that wouldn't be good. We're not looking to have inflation anchor below 2%. We're looking to have it anchor at 2%. So if we do face those circumstances, then we'll have to deal with that. I think as of now, the question, we want to take advantage of this situation and finish the job on inflation while keeping the labor market strong.
Edward, let's go, Edward.
Edward Lawrence from Fox Business. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for taking this. So as I've heard from some district Fed presidents, is it, in your view, a little premature to think that rate cuts are right around the corner? And then when we do see that first rate cut, should we interpret that as the beginning of a rate cut cycle, or is it a one-off?
So I'll point to that language on your first question. We included that language in the statement to signal clearly that with strong growth, strong labor market, inflation coming down, the committee intends to move carefully as we consider when to begin to dial back the restrictive stance that we have in place. So if you take that to the current context, we're going to be data dependent. We're going to be looking at this meeting by meeting. Based on the meeting today, I would tell you that I don't think it's likely that the committee will reach a level of confidence by the time of the March meeting to identify March as the time to do that, but that's to be seen. So I wouldn't call, when you ask me about in the near term, I'm hearing that as March. I would say I don't think it's probably not the most likely case or what we would call the base case. Then your second question is...
Is this the start of when we see a cut, is it the start of a cutting cycle, or could it just be a one-off?
That's going to depend on the data. The whole thing is, this is going to depend on the data. We're going to be looking at the economic data as it affects the outlook and the balance of risks, and we're going to make our decisions based on that. And it could wind up, we'll have another SEP at the March meeting, and people will write down what they think. But in the end, it's really going to depend on how the economy evolves. We talked about there are risks that would cause us to go slower. For example, stronger inflation, more persistent inflation. There are risks that would cause us to, or if they happened, that would cause us to go faster and sooner, and that would be a weakening in the labor market, or for that matter, very, very persuasive lower inflation. Those are the kinds of things. So we're just going to be reacting to the data. That's really the only way we can do this.
Victoria.
Hi, Victoria Guido with Politico. Could you talk a little bit more about productivity growth? You've mentioned multiple times about, the level of wage growth that's consistent with 2% inflation. We've obviously seen, you were talking about ECI this morning, in which it's cooled a little bit, but still sort of above what you wanted to see. Growth has been very strong. How much of those numbers do you attribute to productivity? And do you see that productivity as sort of just temporary because of the factors, the labor and supply chain factors you were talking about, or do you think that productivity growth will fade over time?
So this is a really interesting question, and I think my own view is, I think if you look back to the pandemic, you saw a spike in productivity as workers were laid off and activity didn't decline as fast, and then you saw a deep trough of productivity. And then over the last, you saw high productivity last year in 23. I think we're basically in the throes of getting through the pandemic economy. And the question will be, what is it that has changed? The productivity tends to be based on, fundamental aspects of our economy. Is there a case, will it be the case that we come out of this more productive, more on a sustained basis? And I don't know. What would it take? It would take, people talk about AI, but my guess is that we may shake out and be back where we were, because I'm not sure I see work from home doesn't seem like it's a big productivity increaser. AI, artificial intelligence, generative may be, but probably not in the short run, probably maybe in the longer run. So I'm not seeing why it would, but right now, I would say the productivity is kind of what falls out of the broader forces that are driving people in and out of the labor force, and activity returning and supply chains getting fixed.
This is wild.
Right, so would that be behind why we've seen such strong growth, but we've also seen inflation fall, that maybe there's just a higher level of productivity?
That's one way to look at it, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Americans finally decided to start working hard because they're getting paid more.
Hi, Chair Powell. Nancy Marshall-Genzer with Marketplace. I want to ask a little bit more about housing. I'm wondering, how closely are you watching rent and housing prices as you evaluate whether and when to cut rates? And it seems like housing prices are not coming down as quickly as you expected.
So when we think about our statutory goals are maximum employment and price stability, and that's what we're targeting. We're not targeting housing price inflation, the cost of housing, or any of those things. Those are very important things for people's lives, but they're not, those are not the things we're targeting. We're also well aware that when we cut rates at the beginning of the pandemic, for example, the housing industry was helped more than any other industry. And when we raise rates, the housing industry can be hurt because it's a very interest-sensitive sector. On top of that, we have longer run problems with the availability of housing. We have a built-up set of cities, and people are moving further and further out. So there hasn't been enough housing built, and these are not things that we have any tools to address. But where it comes into play very specifically in our work is inflation, which is a combination. It's really rental inflation. You're taking owner's equivalent rent and then actual rent paid by tenants, and you're running that through the CPI calculation or the PCE calculation, the one we look at. And what that's telling you is that market rents are increasing at a much lower rate or even being flat, and that will show up in inflation over time. It has to, as long as that remains the case. So.
And just real quick, what is your response to the letter that was sent to you by some members of Congress asking the Fed to lower interest rates to make housing more affordable?
My response is what I started with, which is that our job, the job Congress has given us, is price stability and maximum employment. Price stability is absolutely essential for people's lives, most importantly, not most importantly, mostly for people at the lower end of the income spectrum who are living at the edges, at the margins. And so for someone like that, high inflation, in the necessities of life, right away you're in trouble. Whereas even middle class people have some scope to absorb higher costs. So we have to it's our job, it's what society has asked us to do, is to get inflation down. And the tools that we use to do it are interest rates. So that's how we think about that.
Courtney.
Courtney Brown from Axios. Can you give us some insight into whether the committee discussed the possibility of slowing balance sheet runoff in the months ahead?
Oh,
yes. So,
go read your notes, bro.
I would start by saying that balance sheet runoff so far has gone very well. And as the process has continued, we're getting to that time where questions are beginning to come into greater focus about the pace of runoff and all that. So at this meeting, we did have some discussion of the balance sheet, and we're planning to begin in-depth discussions of balance sheet issues at our next meeting in March. So those questions are all coming into scope now, and we're focusing on them, but we're at the beginning of that process, I would say.
Quick follow-up, is it the case that the Fed would decide to lower rates and make adjustments to the balance sheet runoff in tandem?
Yes, we do. We see those as independent tools, and so they don't. For example, if you're normalizing policy, you might be reducing rates but continuing to run off the balance sheet. In both cases, that's normalization. But from a strict monetary policy standpoint, you could say we're loosening and one with tightening. So that could happen. It's not something we're planning or thinking about, but right now we're thinking about getting to a place where we're going to see the balance sheet run off to continue. We're watching it carefully, and as I said, we'll be looking into that as a committee starting in March.
Thanks.
Simon Urbanovich with The Economist. Thank you, Chair Powell. You've mentioned 6 good months of inflation data, but that not being enough to build up confidence. Based on your previous response that your base case is you probably wouldn't start easing yet in March, the implication is that 8 good months might not be enough either. Roughly how many months do you think you might need of good inflation data to be confident?
Yeah, I'm not in a position to put a number on it. I'm just going to say, it's not that we don't have any confidence. We have growing confidence, but not to the point where we feel like it's a highly consequential decision to start the process of dialing back on restriction, and we want to get that right. And we feel like the strong economy, strong labor market, inflation coming down, it gives us the ability to do that. We think that's the best way we can serve the public, because ultimately, we've made a lot of progress on inflation. We just want to make sure that we do get the job done in a sustainable way. That's how we're thinking about it. In terms of when that'll be, that'll all come out of our communications, and we won't keep that a secret.
Hi, Chair Powell. Evan Reiser with M&I Market News. Can you explain a little bit more on what you're considering when tapering QT? Do you need to see the overnight reverse repo facility all the way down to zero, or is it something that you can start with a couple $100 billion there?
Not a decision that we've made, but I wouldn't think we wouldn't be taking a position that it's got to go to zero. I mean, if it were to stabilize at a different level, but that's not a decision that we've made. That's what we'll be talking about at the March meeting. A whole range of issues will be briefed up, and the committee will get into all of the issues that will be arising over the course of the next, let's say, year or so.
Greg. Thanks, Greg Robb from Market Watch. Chair Powell, I want to change gears a little bit. In the presidential primary campaign that's been going on for the last 9 months or so, your name has come up often, and many Republican candidates had said that they probably wouldn't want to give you a third term. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that. Do you want another term? You've had on the Fed. What's your stance on that?
I don't have a stance on that. It's not something I'm focused on. Focused on doing our jobs. This year is going to be a highly consequential year for the Fed and for monetary policy, and we're all of us very buckled down, focused on doing our jobs.
Jennifer.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Jennifer Schonberger with Yahoo Finance. As you mentioned, core PCE has been running at 1.9% over the past 6 months, and you guys are actually expecting core inflation higher this year at 2.4% compared to that 6-month measure. Given that forecast and that the median is for 3 rate cuts this year, what happens if inflation stays where it's been over the last 6 months for the next 6 months?
So we'll update our inflation forecasts at the next meeting. You referred to the December meeting. That's 3 months old, so it might be lower now given the data we've gotten. So look, as I mentioned, we're going to be reacting to the data. If we get very strong inflation data and it kicks back up, then we'll go slower or later or both. If we got really good inflation data soon, that would matter for both that would tell us that we could go sooner and perhaps go faster. So we're just going to be, but of course we'll weigh that with all the other factors. We're setting policy based on the totality of the data.
But just to follow, if inflation stays where it is currently, that would probably mean that the real interest rate becomes more restrictive. Would that mean you'd have to trim more, perhaps, than you already have factored in?
Well, I think if we came to the view that that the 6-month inflation numbers, which are very close to 2, were in PCE world, if we thought that is really where we're going to be, then yes, our policy would be in a different place. It would. But that's the whole point, is we're trying to get comfortable and gain confidence that is where, that inflation is on a sustainable path down to 2% or toward 2%.
Daniel.
Hi, Chair Powell. Daniel Davis, Agence France-Presse. I just wondered if I could get your comment on the recent consumer confidence data. It seems to suggest that consumers are sort of moving towards a much more optimistic view of the economy. I just wonder, is it fair to say that they're moving towards where the Fed appears to have been in recent months? And do you think that inflation and falling inflation perhaps has played a role in that? And what challenges do you see going forward? Thank you.
Yeah, so it's been interesting that confidence surveys have been weak at a time when unemployment has been low, very low, historically low for a couple of years, but nonetheless that's been the case. And we've asked ourselves why that is, and the one obvious answer, we don't pretend to have perfect wisdom on this, but one obvious answer is that the price level is high. So prices went up much more than 2% per year for a couple of years, and people are going to the store and they're paying much more for the basics of life than they were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and they're not happy about it. And it's fine that inflation's coming down, but the prices they're paying are still high. So that is what that has to be some part of why people are unhappy, and they're right to be unhappy. This is why we need to keep price stability. It's why we need to do our jobs, is so that people don't have to deal with things like this. In terms of you're right. In recent surveys, you've seen a couple of significant increases in consumer confidence or happiness with the economy. I guess that's a good thing. That can support spending, can support economic activity. There's some evidence of that. But it is a fact that we have seen a meaningful increase. I think levels of confidence are still maybe not as high as they've been at various times, but they certainly have come up.
Ryan.
Thank you for taking our questions. Brian Manastina in business. Committee members have said they like to meet with business leaders and stakeholders in person to learn more about the economy in real time, given that some data are subject to large revisions, the issue of seasonal adjustments being thrown off balance, and many readings of the economy being quarterly. So did any members say they've learned anything not yet reflected in the data, or have you yourself learned anything through anecdotal evidence that hasn't been captured in the data yet?
Well, yes. I'm a big believer that yes. So we do meet with outside groups who come from all different parts of the economy, and I always feel like I spent most of my life in the private sector looking at individual companies, individual management teams, and then building out from that. And so starting with GDP data and working into what's actually affecting people's lives is challenging. It's very hard. So I really like anecdotal data. In addition, as you know, the 12 reserve banks have really the best network of anyone. That in all their districts, they're talking to not just the business community, but the educational, medical, nonprofit community. They have arms into all of that. And so when they come back, that's what goes into the beige book. But they come back, and what each reserve bank president does is during the Outlook go around, they'll say, in my district, and they'll talk about 100 conversations. They won't talk up. They will give you input based on 100 conversations that they've had with people of all different walks. And I personally find it very helpful in understanding what's going on. And also, I think you hear things before they show up in the data sometimes.
Did any of them notice slowing economy based on what they've heard from their district?
Yes, I mean, if you look back the last, not this beige book, but the one before, there was a lot of slower activity. I think that what you're hearing now is things are picking up a bit. You're hearing not in every district and not every person that we talk to, but you're overall, it feels like you're hearing things picking up at the margin. So that's what comes through.
Let's go to Jeff Cox for the last question.
Thank you, sir. Jeff Cox from CNBC.com. Just kind of looking to put it all together. You had talked about basically the economy looking strong with 3.3% annualized growth in the fourth quarter. Does the strength of the economy speak more loudly to you now than any inflation threat might? That you're in a position, in other words, to keep rates elevated as long as the economy stays strong, and you're more tilted towards that. And then also, perhaps, are you worried at all that the economy is maybe a little little too strong right now and that inflation could come back at some point?
I'm not so worried about that. It's, again, we've had inflation come down without a slow economy and without important increases in unemployment, and there's no reason why we should want to get in the way of that process if it's going to continue. So I think declining inflation, continued declines in inflation are really the main thing we're looking at. Of course, we want the labor market to remain strong too. We don't have a growth mandate. We've got a maximum employment mandate and a price stability mandate. And those are the two things we look at. Growth only matters to the extent it influences our achievement of those two mandates. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. So that's the meeting. It's over. I want to talk to you guys about a lot of this. I want to set up a chart for you, though, because I want to explain everything he said. And when I say he's double talking out of his mouth, it's because of this right here. Okay? So this is the Fed. This is their the Fed's balance sheet. Okay? So as you can see, and I'll show it to you in detail, you guys can see, this is back during the Great Depression here. The Great Recession, which was 2007, 2009, 2008. You guys know the housing crisis. The Fed, at that time, Rob Bernanke, I believe, was chairman of the Fed. He got with Hank Paulson, and they decided they were going to do something unprecedented. They were going to buy up trillions of dollars worth of assets. Now, when the Fed buys assets, guys, when he's saying they're going to shrink their balance sheet, the assets themselves are actually, they have to be federally owned. So like governmental properties, so I'll give you an example. Treasuries, T-bills, T-notes, they have to be that way, and or they could be some MBSs, some mortgage-backed securities, but it's all tied to what's federal, right? Or what's owned by the government per se. But here's how this works. They buy them on a timeline. So they might buy them for a year or two, 10 years, 5 years. You guys understand where the way notes go. But as they're buying up these assets, that's allowing the interest rates to stay, low, relatively low. So when they bought in $2 trillion to save the housing crisis, that was zero, guys. They got it to zero, and they bought up $2 trillion. But look at what happened over the next X amount of years. It inflated just enough, like a balloon, where they picked up. But this is the pandemic, and this is the problem you have. When the Fed, they don't necessarily print money. It's not, hey, they printed money. I know we use that term. We're like, oh, they're just printing money. What they do is they actually leverage the position against a bank. So any bank might be able to borrow money that they didn't before, and the Fed backs that loan with one of these instruments, right? So when he's saying they're going to sell off, all they're going to do is roll off. It's actually called like a roll off. And let me make sure I get myself back on the screen here, because there we go. All right. So all they're going to do is just like roll off the assets themselves. So they'll roll it off. Let's just say the T-bills are expiring at this point. They're going to right now, I believe they're unwinding up to like $100 billion a month. That's what's been the average. But guys, they hit all the way up to $9 trillion, $8.97 trillion was their balance sheet. So how do you ever get it back to zero? How do you ever come back down? You technically can't, because he spoke out both sides of his mouth, because he says, hey, the employment, it's going great, yada, yada, yada. But you remember what I told you. I told you this 2 years ago. I said, well, when you see employment drop off 2 million jobs, then you know we're heading in the right direction. Because here's the problem, guys. When they're naming, they go ECI. Whenever you hear that, guys, it's the Employment Cost Index. How much does it cost an employer to hire someone? And we're not just talking about wages, because everybody wants to factor in wages. They go, well, they had a 2% increase on their pay. They had a 3% increase on their pay, but it's also benefits as well. So when you do payroll and benefits, and you combine those, you're looking at 5.1, 4.8, 4.9% is what people are paying, the cost of the employment. So that's how they get that ECI. But he's saying ECI is so strong. That means people are paying more, yes. So therefore, they can afford these inflated prices of items. The Consumer Price Index, the CPI, which comes out and tells you, oh, well, inflation is dialing it back. Well, as deflation kicks in, okay, listen, as deflation kicks in, the employer now is making less margin, because the cost of goods sold, the COGS, everything around you is a less margin. So unless you had a reduction in pay Okay, payroll and or the employment force, your actual employment pool. Unless you had a reduction, your margins are going to be minimum. Meaning, the top of this economy, the companies that keep this thing churning, they're going to have to lay people off. So, however they want to pick their poison, you have to remember this meeting did not lower interest rates. You can come up and be like, you know what, guys, we're doing great. We need more data. You don't need more data. The data's already there. It's not going to change from now until May. I promise you. We're in February. From February to May, it's not going to change. But you have 2 more meetings, and you tell me you don't know if you're going to lower or not? You have no choice because you didn't lower. You raise it to an all-time high level at 5.5, 5.75, whatever it may be, and you're stuck. You're in cruise control mode at this level, at this high level, and you're going to wait till what happens. Housing falls apart, employment falls apart, because deflation is coming. Yes, the things cost less, and or it's evening out because we're getting paid more. But the unfortunate part is corporate America is not making more money. This is why big tech is laying off people, because yes, you're going to even out, but someone has to lose. Jerome Powell, you know this. And then tell your buddies over there in private equity, the Carlyle Group, Blackstone, Apollo, Ares, Bain and Company, and tell these guys that you work with your whole life, private equity, and they're going to give you a job after you don't seek your reelection, like you refuse to answer right now. You're focused. I'm telling you, Jerome Powell, that they're coming in with the big broom. They're coming in to sweep in and take everything. Cripple companies, take those buildings like you would do with Kohl's, right? They can't afford it and they're going to sell off because no one can sustain the prices that you're holding. No one can sustain 5.5. No way. You can tell me the cost of living, you can tell me everything, but everyone has to essentially rent out their home. If you are out there and you watch this video somehow, some way, someday, there is no way on God's green earth that you can lose your house. Listen to me. You cannot lose your home at all. It's not even possible. This is the problem I have with the Fed right now, okay? It's not even possible to lose your home if you wanted to. Do you know why? Because no matter what you paid for it, 98% of Americans don't have an interest rate at 5.5%. They have it well below that. If you bought your house within the last 15 years, you don't have that interest rate. Meaning you could rent your house. I can come in here, come rent my house. They're going to pay your mortgage to rent the house. You'll figure out where you want to live, downgrade, go pay, $2,000 for a little 1-bedroom, hash it out in there. But I promise you, your mortgage is $4,000. Someone's paying it because the interest rates are that ridiculous. This is what we're talking about. You're going to tell me one thing out of your side of here, and this is the truth, because there's guys like me that have lived it. There's guys like me that just didn't wake up yesterday and read a book. We actually lived through 2008, 2009, 92 when we had to put a sign in front of my house, home for sale. Done all that shit. And I'm telling you right now, if you lose your home now, you're an idiot. Put it up for rent. It's not going anywhere. You're going to be fine. But they know this. He knows this. I promise you, go look at it, guys. Go look at retail, okay? Go look at retail and go look at the percentage, the margin. The margins themselves per product. Deflation is setting in now. The issue is you had to pay everybody more. So now that deflation is coming off the top line, how do you fix your bottom line? Well, thank God there's a company out there named GameStop that not only took away overtime pay, not only restructured their hours of employment to the store itself and the facility, not only shrank their workforce, and then they paid their senior directors and their store directors in RSUs, equity of the stock itself, rather than cash. This is how you run your business when you're dealing with an environment with massive cash burn rates and a Fed policy that refuses to adjust. I remember because I was here, Jerome Powell, in 2021, when you said live on the stream, you said inflation what was the word he used, guys? It's just, God, what was the word? Oh, it just left me. He said transitory. There it is. You said it's just transitory. And I quote, and I said, you're crazy because McDonald's is selling a Big Mac for $7. Jack in the Box tacos are $1.50 and not $1, and I know what money's worth. So yes, people can go get a new job today, and they can adjust because of the CEI, the ECI, I apologize, the Employment Cost Index. I understand that if you have a job today and every 2 years you switch your job, you're going to make more money than the person who's loyal to their company. I know that part because everybody has to adjust every year for that increase, for that index that is. But hey, what do I know? I know that I saw the Fed print the most money it's ever printed in their life when it came to COVID, and no one's paid for it yet. No one's paid for it yet. And it just so happens that at that very moment, the year before, 2 years before COVID ever hit, there was a lot of hedge funds out there, a lot of private equity swinging a whole bet onto a little company called GameStop. That little thing on my wall here. And I'm telling you guys, they all bet against it. And now they're in big trouble because the Fed printed $9 trillion, an additional $5 trillion. Somebody has to pay for the housing crisis, somebody has to pay for COVID, and somebody has to pay for shorting GameStop. And it's all correlated. And they can tell me I'm crazy. They can tell me I'm wrong. They can tell me I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But I promise you, me and Jerome Powell can have a sit down. And I'm going to tell them exactly what I just told you. You can't explain it any better. You can't sprinkle the shit on me, kid. And there's not enough people that watch the channel to understand that this whole world should be paying attention to this information. Now, I just didn't make it up. I'm living it. I'm living it. I looked at my margins on my own company where we're right there doing it. I said, oh my God, we're down 1% on margin? Is that because we're in competition with someone else? No, we're in competition with ourselves. How are we going to beat out last year? What are the margins shortened down for? Deflation. So deflation is here. So why the hell do we lock in the rates at 5.5? Why is it that, oh, well, we'll have to see more data. We need more confidence, but trust me, this is going good. This is going good. We're ready for this, but you can't even move it 25 bips. You can't go 25 basis points down. It makes no sense. And if you go down too fast, what happens, guys? Obviously, it's going to go right back into the category that it was, which is a recession. You keep saying we're avoiding a recession. Well, then good. Then we're just going to do 10 years of this shit. And I'm just going to keep buying. GameStop doing the opposite of successful Costco. That's completely wrong. That's completely wrong, and I can't even speak on it. I can't even speak on it in depth that I know. Just know that I'm confident in what I'm doing. So there you go. 2019 secret Fed bailout for everybody. When the food bill drops, then you know inflation is going down until it's cheap again, and the rates should only be going up and down. Yeah, but that's in my opinion. Well, here's the problem, Maverick. It's not that the food bill drops. You're making more money. Your W-2s are higher. So who cares how high this food rate's going to go? We're just going to keep playing with bigger numbers, apparently. We're going to keep printing money, quote unquote. We're going to keep playing with numbers, bigger numbers. So, Reek's out here bragging about his 6'6", right? 6 inches, 6 feet, 6 figures. But that's what the homeless guy is going to be bragging about. And Reek can't brag about 7. Look at your electric bill, food bill. Has it gone down yet? Hell no. When the energy and food drops, then you start to think lower rates. Trust me, bro. Trust me, bro. Costco is adding stores and adding employees. GameStop doing the complete opposite. I don't even think you understand, SpongeBob. See, I know things you don't know. I know that Costco increased their full-time ratio versus part-time ratio. I know that they actually are doing less employees per building than more. Oh, you didn't know that part because I don't tell you that part. You think you know things and you don't. Because you're expanding, because you're growing, doesn't necessarily mean that you're being productive. That's the issue. When this guy tells you, he has the nerve to say AI is going to make them more productive and or because you can't work from home and be productive. It depends on the sector and the field, whatever you're doing, but I don't even care. I'm not going to be around. I will not be working in 30 years from now. So what the hell, man? This guy's going to be dead. What are we talking about? More productive? I'm sorry, I can't drive a forklift in my living room. But there are technologies out here that I'm doing more right now on YouTube than I would ever do in my day. I'm educating you right now. And I'm talking to you. Who was this one? SpongeBob Axelrod. the hater of the crew. Remember, SpongeBob, when you type, I want a super chat. I'm not reading your text until you send me a super chat because you're one of the haters of the group. I don't even know why you show up every day. That Marantz Rantz and his, what they say, the delusional lackeys or the loyalies or whatever they say. I'm going to give you more than anybody you watch. I'm going to give you the truth. I know it costs a lot to give the truth. I get it. I love listening to you while I work. Your wife is one lucky lady. Thanks for all that you do. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. All the time. Blame it on inflation, the government says. Yet I saw a massive underground bunker stockpiling food for the tractor trailers load. Blame it on the farmers. Government controls it all. You know, I don't know, Hulk Hogan. I really don't care because here's why. I'll just tell you why right now, guys. Because you can get this all under control. You could lower the rates and make the economy start booming again. But it's an election year. So doing it now doesn't translate to votes come November. But doing it in June and May and in August during the campaign season translates to votes. Oh, I've been the president for the last 4 years, and as you can see, we are lowering rates. We've got through the pandemic. Hello, that was 4 years ago. 4 years ago. Just so happens pandemic happened opportunistically during an election, and we haven't found the cure for inflation and or to introduce deflation until right before another election. Magically. That's what it took. So they can keep doing what they're doing. They can keep buying these T-bills and holding on to them. But like I told you, they bought so many. They just went through on $5 trillion. I apologize. And they're unwinding. They're rolling it out. So from $8.97 trillion at the peak, they're probably at around 7.7 just last month. So they've gone off around 1.2 trillion because 12 months, 100 billion a month. Yeah, so 1.2 trillion. I'm assuming. I study a little bit. I do a little bit. You'll figure it out. Powell had to mention AI because Nancy Pelosi needs those calls to keep on printing. I don't know if it's that route. I think it's a different route. Remember that he's part of the Carlyle Group, and you can only imagine what they're trying to invest in. If you heard David Rubenstein, and I played this part, he was telling private equity and all the other firms out there, there's deals to be made. Guys, this is the most dry powder they've ever had on the sideline. You know why they're not doing deals? Do you know, guys, they did deals for 15 years. They did deals. Well, realistically, from 2009, 7 in that range, all the way to 2019, they were doing deals at 0% interest. And all of these loans that they let out, now it's covey heavy, and they're coming in with the paddle. And what's happening? Bankruptcies are happening. They're gutting people dry. Because remember, it's a cycle. You get these guys to go ahead and bankrupt right now, and then it reminds you of the 92, 93, 94 season when they got everyone to bankrupt as well. And then back to 82, 83, 84 when they got everyone to bankrupt back then. So these corporate raiders are waiting for their opportunity to pounce again. And you can't do it at high inflation rates, and you can't do it at high bond rates, and you can't do it at high interest rates, period. You can't because no one's going to let you loan money. No one's going to loan money right now. Remember, this is a battle between banks and private equity. People need to know this part because private equity are the billionaires. If you guys don't know that, they are the billionaires that no one wants to tell you about. Okay, there's like Ken Griffin. I get it. He's a billionaire playboy. He's the richest man when he was in Illinois. He's one of the richest men in Florida. The man's worth $30 billion, whatever it may be. But when you see private equity and numerous private equity billionaires, they're all running funds. And these funds have billions of dollars. So pension plans that forward the money because no one's going to retire. Remember, you've been paying into a pension plan for 30 years, a lot of people. Over those whole 30 years, they put money into a fund that's going to regenerate a return at some point within 10 to 15 years, 5 years, fast turnaround, but 10 years, 15 years. So those funds that turn around and pay you back X amount, 30% a year, you 9X your money, whatever it may be. Yes, your pension plan goes crazy, goes through the roof because you're invested with Apollo, you're invested with Blackstone. But here's the trick. All these dudes invested in the stuff before the pandemic. Now they're trying to outlive the pandemic because they're trying to get into a new fund. They're trying to get into a new investment. And people are waiting with dry powder when these interest rates come down so they can do it again because they don't call it a junk bond anymore, but it's covey heavy. They come in with the covenants and then they come in with the people. And there's a new group of people. There's a new whole fold of people coming into these companies infiltrating these companies as CEO, as one of the board of directors, as a CFO, as a COO. They're all graduates of the Wharton Business School. They've all went to Darden Business School in Virginia. They all went to UCLA Management School, and they're all getting into all these companies with the same idea, the track record of what daddy did. Believe it, because while all the baby boomers are cashing out, they're getting their jobs. They're getting promoted. They're not doing the Menendez brothers deal where they're killing people. No, they're just waiting to get dad out the way. So yes, Leon Black has kids in private equity. You have additional Adam Aaron. His kids are in private equity. Go figure. There's so many people's, the offspring, they're in private equity, and they get there with the cachet of the name. So when you read a name like Bill Pulte, you have to know exactly what it is. It's someone living off the fame of someone else and the hard work of someone else. But these kids are going to screw up. These kids are going to lose it because there's guys like us, guys and girls like us, right? Men and women like us, fathers, mothers, blue-collar workers like us, people that have turned the tables, people that now read those SEC filings, people that understand the 8Ks, the 10Qs, the 10Ks, understand who's holding a position, who's not. People who actually read and do the due diligence for their investments. There's a select few group of people, and you're one of them. But 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you weren't. They have never seen you coming, guys. They had no idea you were coming. So they're stuck. They're stuck in a couple of investments that they can't get out of. And I know one for sure. I know one for sure, and I'm never letting it go. Because this Fed can figure out what they want to do. They can start wars across the country, guys. They can do it, but I'm telling you right now, I look at Ukraine, and I looked at it. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Twitter. They're partying. They're having poolside parties, bottling bottles. That's not a country at war. It's not. So funneling billions and trillions of dollars overseas is not going to rattle my cage. This holy war that's happening between Palestine and Israel, not going to rattle my cage. People want me to speak on things. People want me to be the moral authority for something, to stand outside of the SEC with the sign that says, we've had enough. Marantz, talk about the financial plumbing. I'm going to make it simple. I remember what they told me. Kiss, Marantz, kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. Keep it stupid, simple. Okay, I'll kiss. And I won't tell. GameStop. Can't stop, won't stop, GameStop. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Unfortunately, it has to be cut short because I have to coach basketball tonight, got to pick up my son, and I got a life to live. And so do you. I'm going to be back tomorrow, guys. I'm going to be live most of the day tomorrow. I appreciate each and every single one of you guys for hanging out with me, supporting me, doing what we can. I hope you guys got some info out of this, and I'll get back to you all. Send me a chat. Hit me up in the DMs. You know where to find me. TikTok, Twitter, Discord, YouTube, Marantz Rantz. GameStop. Can't stop, won't stop. GameStop. I'm going to see you around, millionaires, and you know where to find me. Peace.
Welcome to Marantz Rantz, no advice on finance. Spin the wheel and take a chance. Get an NFT and a little education. The system got undertold, that knowledge is flotation. You wanna learn? Well, you came to right place. You're pumping AMC, might get slapped in the face. Get your due diligence, know who the villain is. Don't be a sheep when the shepherd's carnivorous. So come learn, laugh, and maybe you win big. And listen up, y'all, the wheel is not rigged. Everybody get a chance in the live chat. Kyoto spin wheel, you win just like that. Retail fight back and this retail winning. Y'all just wait, man, this is just the beginning. All fellow Simeons, GME group singing the truth. We just chillin', infinity pool swimming. So welcome to Marantz Rantz. A lot of knowledge but no advice on finance. Don't even need pants, you can tune in naked like Henny the Mayo Man. Internet's most hated. Don't wanna lose your money, then it's time for you to listen. If you're ignorant, invest in AMC, a superstition. The stream about ready, they told us to don't dance. I do what I want. Welcome to Marantz Rantz. 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 Welcome to Marantz.